Recording in progress.
So welcome everyone to the Radiant Parsha with teachings by Rebbe Nachman and the Tzaddikim. And it's amazing that we're having this class today, because if I could tell you all the obstacles, there were a lot, but Baruch Hashem, we're here. So thank you to Dr. Eleanor Gaudas for sponsoring these classes, and may it be a merit for her and her family, and may she and her family receive all the blessings of the Torah. Okay, so we are going to go with Parshat Korach, and Parshat Korach is truly one of the most intense parshas of the Torah. And it's also my birthday parsha, which means that I've given a little extra attention to it on my own. So what we know about anything we're learning in Torah is we should find ourselves in it. Rebbe Nachman, for example, tells us when we say Psalms, we should try to find ourselves in Psalms. We should try to hear and see something that has meaning for us, something that's going to help us come closer to Hashem and to serve him. And actually, I'm in the wrong view. Okay, for some reason, let's see. Hopefully, everybody can see me in speaker view. So anyway, so this idea is that each of us has a parsha that we have an affinity for. We may have more than one parsha we have an affinity for, but when it comes to our birthdays, we know that there definitely is a kind of energy when we're born, and that mazal, that flow, that energy is connected to whatever's occurring in the parsha. The parsha is alive for all times. It's the Torah is the only one and truly living document. Okay, it's not the Constitution, it's not the Declaration of Independence, it's the Torah. It's the parsha that you connect with. So this parsha, Parshat Korach, is a very intense and strange parsha, and for many, many years, it has puzzled me how I keep finding new things in it, but also not only that, how it seems to give me a boost and inspiration every time I read it, even though it could be said that this might be viewed as a kind of negative parsha. So let's start with the story of Korach. So this parsha begins with Vayikach Korach ben Yitzchar ben Kahas ben Levi Dasan and Aviram b'nei Eliav v'on ben Peles b'nei Reuven. So it gives us Korach's genealogy. Korach was the son of Yitzchar, who was the son of Kahas, who was the son of Levi. And it says that he separated himself with Dasan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Peles, who was from the tribe of Reuven, who was Reuven's child. So what is going on with this specific genealogy? So what we understand from this, and I want to turn to the page where the genealogy is so that I can describe it to you, is that Korach was Moshe's first cousin. Okay, oops, I have to turn off my sound. And I don't know, I don't think she understands. She has to sign in. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, one moment, please. I'm sorry about that. Let me turn off my sound on my phone. I thought I did, but apparently I didn't. Okay, so what is his genealogy? So Korach belongs to the tribe of Levi, okay, which also Aharon belongs to, and Moshe, okay, and Levi's son Kahas had Amram, Yitzchar, Hebron, and Uziel. And Amram was the father of Moshe and Aharon. Okay. And Yitzchar was the second son, and he was the father of Korach. So this tells us a little bit that Korach felt he had yichus. He felt he had a place that was valuable in part because of his heritage, his family relationships. He had an in, so to speak. At least that's what he thought. The Torah goes on, this parsha goes on to show us that that family connection was in a way to his detriment. Because why? Because he relied on it, at least at first in the parsha. And even though since we've been entering the book of Bamidbar, and we've been studying the tribes, and we understand that each tribe had a special function, and we understand that Moshe and Aharon were very special and elevated people, it doesn't go to follow that just because someone belongs to a tribe or belongs to a family, that they have an automatic status. Rebbe Nachman himself said like this. He said that he didn't want his followers to think that just because he was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, that he was a special creation, in other words. He didn't want people to think that that's what gave him his greatness. No, Rebbe Nachman was clear. He said his greatness was because he earned it. He worked on himself. The subtext of this is that he said, all my followers can be tzaddikim if they work on themselves as much as I worked on myself. And that's a message we can take with us from the parsha. So if somebody feels down about social status, family background, and so on, pay it no mind. It's not important. What's important is the work you do on yourself. And this is probably one of the themes in Breslov, is work on yourself. Doesn't matter who you're connected to. It really doesn't, okay? Just learn from the tzaddikim and develop yourself. Excuse me one moment. I'm sorry about that. We had a little noise happening here. So as I said, again, this has been the most difficult morning. How we're even here. Baruch Hashem, we're here. Okay. So as I said, the parsha begins with this description of Korach's genealogy, and he also lets us know who he sided with and who sided with him. So we have Nadav and Avihu. Now we know them from, excuse me one moment, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. We have a little bit of distraction going on in this apartment. Okay, so the idea is that Nadav and Avihu, we know, weren't the most savory of characters. We know them previously. Who were they? They were traitors. They were traitors, really, to the Jewish people in Egypt. However, obviously, they must have done tshuva. They were there at Mount Sinai. They received the Torah at Har Sinai. They crossed the Red Sea. And Korach himself, obviously, had very special qualities. As a matter of fact, the Midrash tells us that Korach, despite the troublemaker that he was actually a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, and a tzaddik. He was a very righteous person. He really wanted to serve Hashem. So what went wrong? So I'll give you an overview of the parsha very briefly. Korach started a rebellion. He had 250 men join him in his rebellion. By the way, they were tzaddikim as well. And the upshot was that he challenged Moshe, he challenged Aharon, and we'll get into the details as we go along. And in the end, the earth opened up and swallowed him alive. And he was buried down in the earth. It was like an earthquake. Now, I will hopefully be able to send you a video of what just recently happened this week in Yerushalayim in the parking lot of Shaarei Tzedek. I don't know if anyone saw this; it was being passed around, but the parking lot. There was a big sinkhole that opened up, and we'll talk about that and what that means to us as we go along. Okay, so let's continue. So let's talk about Korach. So again, his ancestry was seriously illustrious. He also had been chosen to carry the Aron, the tabernacle. He was really already of an elevated status. Okay, I mentioned he was a very learned man. He was considered a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar. Also, he had Ruach Hakodesh. And he saw that, remember, Ruach HaKodesh is that spirit of prophecy. It's not as great as Moshe's level of prophecy, but it's certainly a real prophetic insight. And he saw that his ancestor would be the prophet Shmuel, okay? And that, and because of this, and because of other illustrious forebears, people that, well, not forebears, but ancestors that would come down, or descendants, excuse me, he felt that he was very important, okay, and that he was destined to be the source of very special people. So he looked around and he saw that Moshe Rabbeinu determined that Aharon would be the priest, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and that his sons would therefore be the Kohanim. And Korach's like, what am I, chopped liver? He said, I'm going to be the ancestor of Shmuel. I mean, what's going on here? Shmuel Hanavi. And he felt slighted. And this was the beginning of his downfall. The beginning of Korach's downfall was, number one, he had a chip on his shoulder, okay? He felt that he wasn't getting what he deserved. And number two, he didn't understand his own value. And that is a distinctly Breslov approach to understanding what was going on internally with Korach. Because what was going on internally with Korach, psychospiritually, okay, is of the greatest interest to us. And as I mentioned previously with this parsha, I have really, thought so much about it and davened about it and looked for insights into it over many, many years. And I think that these lessons are valuable for everyone, as did Rebbe Nachman. He says they're valuable. So this idea is that Korach, number one, had a chip on his shoulder. And what was this chip? What was this resentment? It was jealousy. It was the lack of recognition that Moshe Rabbeinu was a tzaddik, and he was above him. That's all. In terms of his righteousness and in terms of the role that Hashem had chosen for Moshe and Aharon, okay? And for Korach, this was something he couldn't swallow. It was mamash torture for him. He wanted to be the leader, or at least have equal status to the leader, to the teacher of the generation. And he couldn't. And it hurt him. And it puzzled him, and it kept him up at night. And because he didn't practice Azamra, he wasn't able to look at the good in other people and look at the good in himself. This spiraled out of control. So First off, he wasn't Dan L'Chavschus Moshe Rabbeinu. He looked at Moshe making Aaron the Cohen Gadol. Moshe was actually following his own prophecy and Hashem's guidelines, but he saw nepotism, where nepotism really wasn't a factor there. Okay, Aaron was the most suited person, and he saw this nepotism, and he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, I followed him loyally up to this point, and now I see that he's just a human being like everyone else, in that he's pushing his own family forward. Okay, why? Because that's what Korach would have done. Because he was at the level, again, he was a tzaddik, he was at a high level, all the commentators tell us, yet he wasn't at that level where he was totally able to bittul himself, totally able to nullify his personal quest for status and power. Okay, and he really was unable to imagine that someone else wouldn't have a personal motivation, that Moshe wasn't out for what he could get. He couldn't conceive of it. Okay, why? So the Midrash tells us something interesting. Korach's self-assurance didn't come from his great Torah knowledge, which admittedly was great. And it didn't come from his righteousness, which admittedly was great. He wanted to serve Hashem and he did his best to serve Hashem. It came from the fact that he was wealthy. The Midrash tells us that that's where his self-esteem was. That's the source of his self-esteem. It wasn't himself. It was the money that he had acquired. And the Midrash tells us that Korach was very, very money hungry. Okay, somebody can be wealthy without being money hungry or driven by money, but he was money hungry. And it says that the tribe of Levi, the tribe that Korach belonged to, lived in poverty. They were the tribe, okay, which we may have mentioned in Parshat Bamidbar, that carried away no gold or silver from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And Moshe commanded every Jew to take money and vessels and wealth out of Egypt because they had performed slave labor for the Egyptians, okay? So therefore they should be compensated. However, the Levium, the tribe of Levi, did not perform slave labor, but they studied Torah. They were free in Egypt, okay? And the tribe of Levi, this worked both ways. They also didn't just not take out money because Moshe commanded, but they had no attachment to a desire for money. And because of that, okay, they were able to be immersed in study of Torah because they didn't desire it, except Korach. Korach was an anomaly, okay? And he started off with this idea that wealth would give him power, okay? Instead of looking in the mirror and saying, I'm a Torah scholar, I'm a good person, I'm a tzaddik, I'm part of this holy tribe of Levi, he decided that that wasn't worth as much. He couldn't have as much status as if he were wealthy. And for him, he wanted status. It wasn't enough that he appreciated himself. He wanted everyone else to look at him, to look up to him. This was the craving for honor. And this was another aspect of his downfall. Now, it's really interesting that the Midrash compares Korach, a holy Jew, to Haman. Haman is a Amalek. Haman is the character who caused all the ruckus that gives us Purim today. Okay, what was the issue? The issue was his jealousy of Mordechai. And the Midrash compares all these factors of Korach, the desire for status, the questioning of the tzaddik. Mordechai was the tzaddik, Moshe's the tzaddik, okay? The not believing that someone could conceivably want something that he didn't want. He didn't even have the imagination to say Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen are on a higher level, and they don't even want these material things because he thought everybody did. He craved honor, he craved respect, he craved status, and he didn't look in the mirror and see his own self-worth. So the message of this particular aspect of the Torah, of this parsha, can be summed up by taking a good, hard look at everything we've discussed the past 20 minutes and putting the pieces together and saying for ourselves, what can we learn from Korah? For me, the overarching message is Azamra. It's the overarching message, and it comes from Rebbe Nachman's teaching. If you aren't able to be dan l'chafschus someone else, and you aren't able to find their nakuda tova, you certainly won't be able to do it in yourself, and vice versa. You won't be able to see the good in yourself, and then you won't be able to see the good in someone else, because you will be judging everyone from a lack of self-esteem. You won't be judging them with holy self-esteem, and you won't be able to assess correctly their drive, what makes them tick, because you don't know what makes yourself tick. And sometimes, okay, we get so caught up in the pace of our lives. I should say not sometimes. I should say more times than not. We get so caught up in everything we're doing and we're accomplishing, and I'm going to achieve and I'm going to push through, that we forget. It happens to everyone. We forget to ask, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we pushing for this? Why are we pushing for that? Okay. Why do you want to go do this project? Why do you want to do that project? Okay, we have to ask, and we have to check our motivations. And this keeps us, not only does it keep us honest, but it keeps us at our highest elevation possible. Because your highest elevation, spiritually speaking, emotionally speaking, is unique to you, and only you can achieve it and maintain it. No one else can give it to you. Okay. Yes, you can daven for it, by the way, and speak to Hashem about it, but that will give you the das, the awareness to figure this out. And again, this is another thing that Korach lacked, was his das. So we go through with all his yichus, with all his family connections, with all his elevated genealogy, with all his Torah knowledge, with all his righteousness. I mean, I can't believe it. The Midrash says again and again and again, he was a tzaddik. Okay, with all of this, his mind spiraled out of control because he compared himself to someone else. He didn't compare himself to himself because he didn't know himself, which made the tipping point into when he really took the misstep, made him vulnerable. And what was the tipping point? The tipping point was his wife, just like Haman. Just like Haman ginned him up, stirred up all that trouble too. I mean, she encouraged him. He was already evil and horrible and whatever. But Korach, if his wife had said to him, what are you thinking? You're a wonderful man. You're fine the way you are. You're a tzaddik. You're a Torah scholar. What do you need to be a big shot for? What do you need to challenge Moshe for? You know, focus on yourself. Focus on your personal growth, okay? So in this case, the wife can be likened to, okay, we don't have the name of his wife, actually. But his wife is the one that really was the one that pushed him. She was the one that was saying, you should be a big shot. Who does Moshe think he is? What's going on? You should have been made Kohen Gadol. Who, why his brother, not his cousin? That shows that his motives aren't pure. Okay. So his wife tipped him over. So what does that mean, his wife? So we can look at it. I just want to find the part that I think is valuable to us here. So we can look at it and we can see that what is going on with this is that the wife can be viewed as his wife, or we can view his wife instead as a part of ourselves. Okay, so why does a woman get the blame? So let's just forget about this idea of it being female and male and just focus on what the feminine represents mystically. And in mystically, the feminine in this particular case represents the dark side, the tendency towards being emotionally overwhelmed, the tendency towards heartbreak and despair, and the tendency to see the negative view of things, okay? And this is part of the feminine attributes, Kabbalistically speaking, okay? There are many good things as well, all right? But we're just going to focus on this. So each of us has a wife, okay, inside us. The wife is the one that pushes us over the edge, okay? View yourself as the husband. You can flip it around if it's more meaningful to you, it's fine. But view yourself and then say, what is my wife whispering to me? Okay, so the first thing that happened was we were taught that in preparation for all Korach service, Moshe Rabbeinu shaved his head and the head of all the Levim. And what happened was he came home with his head shaved and his wife said, oh, you look horrible. You know, what was Moshe thinking? That's disgusting. You look gross. And because of that, she got upset. And she was like, he's trying to degrade you. He's trying to make you look like a fool. He's trying to humiliate you. Okay. No, Moshe was preparing Korach for his service. But Korach, as we mentioned, all those reasons before, was vulnerable to this voice. Okay, this voice was external, his wife, but it mirrored his inner voice. The inner voice was primed and pumped from his gaiva, from his arrogance, for his desire for honor, and he wanted to be equal, if not above everybody else. And because he couldn't see the good in others and he couldn't see the good in himself, he was all ready to hear to that voice, to listen to the voice that was going to tip him over the edge. He was ready to go. And that voice got a hold of him. And it gets a hold of all of us at some point in our lives. It's gotten a hold of me. That voice gets a hold of us and it says, who do you think that other person is? Or who does that other person think he is? Or I should be having that and I'm not having it. And that voice is the voice that has forgotten about Hashem. It's the voice that creeps up on us when we're vulnerable, when we're feeling bad about ourselves, when we've had conflict, when we don't recognize the value of ourselves, the value of our souls, and it takes us down. And we all have had it. Rebbe Nachman describes it as this. He says like this. Okay, there are a few pieces to this voice. He says, a person lies awake before he goes to bed at night because he's had words with someone, he's had a conflict with someone, and he's lying awake in bed. And that conflict is repeating over and over again in his head. And it's getting worse and worse as he repeats it. First, he says, oh, I should have said this to that person. Oh, if only I had said this. And then he thinks, wow, that person's really, really out to get me. And then he thinks, and look, not only what they did today, but look what they did 8 months ago when we went out to lunch and the da-da-da happened. Maybe that's how they really feel about me. And this person's listening to that wife inside, and it's ignoring all the good things in that relationship, all the good things that person's done, and it's taking the person down. Until the focus, instead of the focus being on, I'm going to grow, I'm going to come closer to Hashem, Hashem gives me everything I need, Hashem is giving me messages through both the good and the not so good in my life, or what I perceive as not so good. Instead, it becomes, I'm right and that person's wrong. The other aspect of this, which is deeper, okay, that's an external conflict. That's a less ripe version of the conflict. The other aspect of this is the wife's voice inside that doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. It has to do with ourselves. It's the voice inside that defeats us. I should be doing this, but I never have done it so far. I can't achieve it. That's for this other person to do, not me. I'm not good enough. If I was really good enough, I would have done it already. If I was really good enough, if I really had the ability to do it, Hashem would have made it easier for me to do. It wouldn't have been so difficult. It wouldn't have been such a big challenge. Okay. And so on and so forth. So, and this voice, this wife, the wife of Korach, speaks to all of us. It speaks to all of us about other people for sure. Okay. And that, by the way, is fairly easy to get rid of most of the time, because all you have to do is just knock some sense into yourself. Okay. But when it comes to that internal voice about ourself and our own self-worth, she's very destructive. Okay, or he's very destructive, if you prefer. We've got to silence the wife because she's going to lead us into a pit. Okay. All right. I am going to continue. Let me see. Oh, I really want to go here. Let me go here to, this is so interesting. Okay. So Korach's arguments, what were they about? Because we know he went and challenged Moshe. Okay, so in the beginning, he challenged Moshe and brought 250 men with him and owned Ben Peles. By the way, his wife was the opposite. We'll talk about her later. And what was his challenge to Moshe? So his challenge was like this, okay? And this is from the Yerushalmi Talmud Sanhedrin. Okay, Korach asked Moshe, if a talis is made completely out of techeles threads, does it require tzitzis? So everybody knows what a talis is, or a talit. Okay, techeles is that bluish purple dye from the shellfish or whatever, the snail or whatever it is. And today, most people don't use it because they're not sure they've identified it. And does it require tzitzis, the strings? Since a single strand of techeles on the tzitzis is sufficient for the mitzvah, shouldn't an entire garment made of techeles be exempt from tzitzis? So what does that mean? So first of all, he dyed his whole talis, this purple blue, this dye from the fish. Okay. But the mitzvah as commanded was to have a string that color, or a few strings that color. And even if one string was that color, it was enough. So he said, isn't this better? I don't need a string on here because my whole garment is dyed this color. Then this Gemara says, he asked further, if a house is filled with holy writings, does it require a mezuzah? My house, it's filled with I have a Sidorim, I have Tehillim, I have a whole bunch of holy books in my house. What do I need a mezuzah for? Since a mezuzah contains just 2 Torah passages, okay, it fulfills the requirement for the mitzvah. That's it, right? That's all the mezuzah needs. So why should my house require a mezuzah? I've taught, like I said, he's a Torah scholar, so his tent was filled with Sfarim, with holy books. Okay. Then he asked the minimum area, and we discussed the leprosy briefly before, which wasn't really leprosy. Okay. The minimum area of the leprous mark is about a square centimeter. Okay, because we explained how the Cohen would come and look at the tsaras, the little mark on the skin, and determine. His job was to to determine whether it was pure or impure. So Korach asks, however, the mitzvah goes on to say, if the mark spread to the entire body, it's a sign of purity. How can this be? So Reb Noson tells us that the problem with Korach, in addition to all the other problems we discussed in the first 20 minutes or so of this class, okay, all the issues he had, a lot of issues. But the problem was he just didn't believe in Hashgacha Pratis. He didn't believe that Hashem was supervising things. And he felt that his logic was better than not only Moshe's logic, but Hashem's logic. Hashem determined these are the mitzvahs. We don't know all the reasons for it because our minds are limited. We're human. And Korach said, but my logic is exceptional. I'm brilliant. And he was brilliant. So why can't I do the mitzvahs the way I see fit? Okay. In other words, what was his challenge? His challenge was the same as the non-halachic streams of Judaism's challenge. And they had it in those days too. This was Korah. He was the forerunner of all the people who decided, I'm going to interpret the Torah in the way that's convenient for me. Okay, I'm not going to listen to how Hashem says to do the mitzvahs. Why? Because Korach believed that his intentions were more important than the mitzvah. This is what Reb Noson says and what Rebbe Nachman says. Okay. He believed that his feelings about the mitzvah were more important than the details. Now, Rebbe Nachman assures us that our intentions about a mitzvah are very important. It's not a question. But the actual structure of the mitzvah, okay, the mezuzah, how to hang it at an angle, what it contains, how to put it up, how to make a blessing on the home with it. What was the other one with the tzitzis, and a talus, how a man has to put it on, how it should be made. Okay, whatever the mitzvah is, the structure of it is the vessel for our intentions. And Korach couldn't understand that because Korach couldn't believe that he was a vessel for his Nakuda Tova, his good point, his neshama, his connection to Hashem. He was thinking from here up, okay, from the head up. And because he had a sharp mind, that's what he relied on. We know Korach, like Haman, was a schemer, a manipulator. He spoke out of both sides of his mouth. That's why he was able to get Dasan and Aviram on his side. They were obviously, had issues from before, but they liked the way he thought because he was maneuvering and he was manipulating and he was challenging in all these ways. Oh, the mitzvah of the mezuzah and the Who does it remind us of? It reminds us of poor Korach. He's compared to very not nice people. So first Haman, okay, and then also Esav. And Esav, who asked his father, Yitzchak, oh, how do I tithe straw? Okay. Straw doesn't need a tithe. We don't tithe straw. But he wanted to pretend that he was interested in the mitzvahs. This is sophistry. What is sophistry? Sophistry is related to the word sophisticated, and we can learn a lot from just looking at the root, which is Sophia, okay, which is wisdom, okay? And wisdom of the secular kind, in this case, the Greek kind with Sophia, wisdom, okay, that's not rooted in Torah, goes from wisdom to sophistication to ultimately sophistry, which is falsehood. It's okay to do a little etymology not with Hebrew. It's okay, because it's there to teach us something. So Korah wanted to rely on non-Torah based wisdom. Now, the question is, it's important to this whole conversation. The question is can we ever rely on non-Jewish wisdom? Sure, there are certainly elements of truth in non-Jewish wisdom. But the reason why a person not only has to learn Torah, not only has to learn Torah and Jewish wisdom, but person has to make hitbodedut, has to talk to Hashem about what he's learning, is so that he internalizes it and actualizes it, makes it part of herself. Okay. So in order for all of that to happen, then a person can go and pull a little bit. Okay, I'm going to use this. This is a non-Jewish wisdom that is in line with Torah. I'll pull this little piece out here and that little piece out here, but I know that the rest can't be touched. The rest is a huge challenge. The rest is going to damage my connection with Hashem. Okay, that's also the wife that we spoke about, the one who says that bald head. Okay, shaving your head for this mitzvah, that's crazy. You look disgusting, you know. Okay, that's the voice that questions what we're doing for a mitzvah. This is the way you do it? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, who hasn't said that to themselves? This doesn't make any sense. So this idea is to strengthen this aspect of ourself that silences that voice and is only looking for the truth of Torah and our connection to Hashem. That's the voice we need to train ourselves to listen to. And nobody does it automatically. And nobody's perfect. Everybody's flawed in this area. But one thing for sure is we can all grow in this area. Everyone can grow in this area. Why? Why can everyone grow in this area? Aren't some people just stuck where they are? No. No, that's not Judaism. Judaism is people can change. Everyone can change. There's always hope. Clearly, Korach went down a path where he pushed away all hope for himself. He said, I'm not going to change in the other direction. This is really the direction I want to go. And we know that whatever direction a person wants to go in, that's the path along which he is led. Okay. Let me see. There's so much more. Okay. Get this others. Oh, okay. So anyway, something interesting. So the tzaddikim say that all conflict stems from the conflict between Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Okay. And it comes about because of Adam and Chava's big mess up. All right. And that led to conflict. Okay. And how that happens is a whole other story. We'll save it maybe for when we go to Gracious. But the idea is that all conflict is rooted in the first conflict. And the first conflict had a lot of the same elements as the conflict between Korach and Moshe. First of all, Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen didn't want to fight. Okay. They didn't want to fight. Aaron especially. Aaron was known as what? A pursuer of peace. The Kohanim, the priests, are rooted in the sphere of chesed. Okay. A Jewish priest has that connection with chesed. They embody chesed. Their service is considered chesed. And if people see people who they know for sure, Kohanim, through the centuries, you'll notice something. At least some people say they notice it. I think I notice it too, is that Kohanim tend to be very sensitive. I have Kohanim on both sides of my family, and they're all very sensitive. The men, they tend to be very sensitive. Okay. And the Levium in general, and Korach specifically, as we know, Moshe is rooted in Gevurah, is rooted in the sphere of Gevurah, the sphere of judgment, and the sphere of strength and restraint. And when Chesed leads, the world can exist. When Chesed leads, there's less conflict. There are fewer conflicts. When Gevurah leads, when judgment leads, there are more conflicts. So we know that everybody has a nature. Everybody has a human nature. And we can look in the mirror and we can ask ourselves, am I more Netzach or more Hod? Am I more Gevurah or more Chesed? We can take a look at ourselves and see and understand what that means for us. And someone who is more Gevuradic naturally cares more about righteousness, about seeing things in this world balance out, about they're able to hopefully restrain themselves in certain areas, not always. Okay, it depends on the fire in their makeup. But this idea is that Gevurah should be a little bit secondary to Chesed, at least until Mashiach comes. And that's another topic. Okay, so why? Because when we lead with kindness, there's less conflict, and when there's less conflict, we are actually not just avoiding what happened with Cain and Hevel and Korach and Moshe and Aharon, but we are actually performing a tikkun for it. When we approach peacemaking as something essential to every aspect of our lives, both internally and externally, okay, we are healing the sins and the missteps from time immemorial. And Rebbe Nachman himself was extremely focused on this idea of peace. Peace is a unity of opposites, he said. And he said, that's true peace. Because when two people get along and agree, that's not peace. Okay. It's like what's going on with the diversity thing today. Okay. You can look different than me, but God forbid you should think different than me. Okay. That's in a secular culture way. That's not peace. Peace isn't canceling people who don't agree with you. Peace is, and in Rebbe Nachman's description and idea, peace, of course, must be rooted in Torah. But the two opposing Torah ideas both have validity. And it must be adjoining together. So, for example, you'll have one approach in Torah that maybe emphasizes, let's say, the didactic details of every mitzvah, and another approach that maybe emphasizes simcha. And all of these things have to coexist. They all have to be brought together. And each of us can do that for ourselves inside. This is another thing that Korach wasn't able to do, unfortunately, which is why he rose up against Moshe Aharon, in that peace wasn't important to him. Clearly it wasn't. What was important to him was all the things that we discussed before: status, power, respect and honor, money, being a big shot, whatever it was. He couldn't reconcile that he was very valuable on his own. He had Torah learning. He had righteousness. He served Hashem. This is what was his true value, his true worth. And he couldn't look in the mirror and see that. And again, he had his wife egging him on. Okay, now, there is someone else in this parsha that's the opposite. And that is On, the son of Pelas. And give me 1 minute to find the page. It's kind of interesting. So when Korach had his fall, okay, he challenged Moshe. I mentioned before about the earthquake and the pit of the earth swallowing him up. When he had his fall, we know that the men went down with him. However, his sons escaped. Okay, his sons were actually very righteous and they escaped. And they had a lot of regrets about what their father was doing. And they were torn between showing honor to their father and showing honor to the tzaddik emes, Moshe Rabbeinu, and also Aaron HaKohen. As a matter of fact, we know in Tehillim, there are Tehillim by his sons. Okay, so if you look into, I don't remember which ones, but the sons of Korach made a song. Okay. And another follower of Korach's also escaped death. And this was On. On was a member of the tribe of Ruvain, which was the neighboring tribe. If you remember that map or that diagram I gave you guys, I drew of the tribes and how they were laid out. So they were neighboring. Okay. So Korach was able to influence them. He used to hang out with them and influence them. And he was a direct neighbor of Korach, and he was drawn into the rebellion. And when he told his wife that he was taking part in this revolt, his wife, okay, spoke up. The wife of On spoke up, and she said, no. She said, you're not going to topple Moshe and Aharon. That's ridiculous. And she explained to him, she was the good wife we have inside of us, okay, the sensitive one, the one who says, you're valuable for who you are. What do you want to do? Start picking a fight. You know, why do you want to go to court with Moshe and Aharon? Are you crazy? Don't pick a fight. Okay, focus on us, focus on the family, focus on your own service of Hashem. Do some mitzvahs, okay? Do some chesed. Don't get involved. And he really felt that it was very difficult for him to extract himself. So what did he do? His wife said, I'll take care of it. I'm going to rescue you. She fed him a lot of alcohol till he passed out. Whether he agreed or not, I don't know, we can debate. He passed out from the alcohol. And then she took her daughter, which was his daughter too, and they went and sat at the entrance to their tent with their hair uncovered. Okay. Now, when Korach sent his messengers to say, okay, we're starting the rebellion now. Come on, On, come on, let's get going. They saw that his wife had her hair uncovered. Now we have to remember, it's a good reminder for us. These were tzaddikim who were involved in the revolt. They were mistaken, but they were righteous people. They were so righteous, they followed the Torah and didn't want to look at a married woman whose hair was uncovered. They looked away, and they wouldn't go near the tent, and they couldn't go and collect On. Their own inner righteousness saved On. Okay. They're saying, I'm not going to cross this line. I may have crossed a line of rebellion somewhere down the line, but I'm not going to cross this line. So that's another inner message for us. Whatever we've done, we've crossed lines. Every one of us has crossed a line. But let's embrace the remaining boundaries at least and say, I'm not going to cross that line. I'm not going to cross this line. That's too far. Okay. And we all have moments like this. Thank God we all have moments like this. So that's how he was saved. Okay. Is that his wife yanked him out of the rebellion. Okay. So that's good. We don't know her name either. I don't think we've learned her name or Korach's wife's name. Okay. Sometimes we have the wife's name, sometimes we don't. Perhaps it's in another source. Okay. So now we get to the rebellion, and they're challenging each other. We know On is saved. We know Korach and Nadav and Avihu and the 250 men are not saved. But what is going on during this time is that the Jewish people, okay, are still challenging Moshe and Aharon. And in brief, there's a plague. A plague arises. What does a plague teach us? So we've had a lot of plagues through, in the Torah and throughout the recent parshas, we hear about plagues. So the plague is from Hashem. It's from Hashem telling people don't go in that direction. So when people look today and they see a plague, or they see a pandemic, or they see an illness, God forbid, there shouldn't be any more illnesses. But when people experience this, it's a message from Hashem, the same way everything else is a message from Hashem. Pay attention. You're on the wrong track. You're making yourself spiritually sick, which is leading to physical sickness. Okay. Or just the pay attention message is there. Whenever we see anything going on in the world, any disaster in the world, whatever that disaster may be, okay, Azal say, the sages say, it's a message to the Jewish people to do tshuva, to return to Hashem, to think about Hashem, to come close to him, to come back to him, to say, I love you, Hashem. Let me grow. Let me grow as a Jew. Let me grow as a person. Okay. But when we ignore that, the messages hit closer to home. Okay. Now, are there times that there could be a plague or something that occurs to the Jewish people, and we see it hitting closer to home, and we don't understand why some very good people are affected by it. Yes, sometimes, okay, certainly in recent events, we've heard about Meron, for example, and I know people who were involved in that tragedy, and I have to tell you that these were all very fine people, okay? Some of them could be classified as tzaddikim, very special men who lost their lives in that terrible tragedy, okay? So why would that happen? They were already turned towards Hashem, weren't they? Yes, they were. It's a message to the rest of us. We need to shape up, okay? Whatever you see out there, it is not narcissistic to think that it's a message to you. Rebbe Nachman said you could learn a message from anyone. He's not the only one who said it, okay? I think the Tzemach Tzedek of Chabad said it also. We can look around us, and whatever we see is potentially a message to us. It depends on who we are, whether we want to see that message, okay? Do we want to see the message? So with that being said, I really want to show you this footage of this crazy sinkhole. Let's see if I can do this. I don't know if everybody heard about it, but it's the sinkhole that just happened a day or two ago in Yerushalayim, in the parking lot of Shaarei Tzedek. And for those of you who haven't seen it, let me see if I can pull it up to the screen. Hold on 1 minute. And okay. Look at that. Don't need the scary music. That's what happened to Korach. Nobody, thank God, was hurt in this. Still a message for us to pay attention. I don't like that scary music. I'm turning it off. I think the scary music is ridiculous. I hope everybody can still hear me. Okay. All right. I hope you were all able to see that. So, you know, the idea is, and you see how Hashem did that so kindly. Yes, some cars were damaged, but nobody was actually hurt. Thank God. Okay. So sometimes the message is very obvious. So, and sometimes it's not so obvious. We all have to use our heads to think about what is the message for me. And I always say, don't get into magical thinking. Don't look for connections that just don't exist, but do look for connections that do exist. So Korach fell down in that hole. He fell into the mouth of the earth, we say, okay? He fell into the mouth of the earth. And that also is a message to us, okay? It says, I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's the P of the earth. And the message to us there is a message that is very often given as a message for Korach is, Korach overarchingly took all that negative stuff that we discussed in the first 20, 30 minutes of the class, and he spoke about it to others. Oh no, what was he doing? He was taking all his negative stuff and he was fomenting the revolution, speaking Lashon Hara. And worse than that, it was worse than Lashon Hara because this was Motzi Shemra, which means that he was, basically giving a bad name to Moshe Aharon. Okay, Lashon Hara is usually when it's true. You still shouldn't say it, but it's true. Okay, it means an evil mouth. But a subcategory is Motzi Shemra, where you try to destroy someone else's name. Because why? Because the drop of negative that you're seeing in them wipes out all the good in them. All the good that they are disappears. And all you see is the negative. And I know this has happened to everybody. It's a universal human condition. We can all work on it. You have somebody who's been wonderful to you, and just one thing happens, and all of a sudden that person is terrible. They're evil. They're no good. They're rotten. they deserve to be, go into the hole with Korach. No, that was Korach's mistake. The mistake was he looked at Moshe, and Moshe didn't even do anything wrong, as we said in the very beginning. He did what he was supposed to do, which is make Aaron the Kohen Gadol. Aaron was the right person for it. Okay, he was the right prophet for the job. And he ascribed negative intentions to Moshe Rabbeinu. And instead of reminding himself over and over again, as he should have done, Moshe's a tzaddik. I may not be at Moshe's level. I may not understand his intentions. He went around manipulating everybody, trying to manipulate Moshe and Aaron, and spoke negative about Moshe and made everybody else have those same negative feelings that he had. He wanted everybody else to hate him too. It wasn't just enough that he hated him. They had to hate him too. And then when he felt the job was done, okay, he spoke the Lashon Hara, the mouth of the earth opened up to match his mouth. He opened his mouth, the earth opened its mouth. Okay, we are basically done for today, unless anyone has any questions. I see Shayna, looks like she left. I don't know. Naomi says this is the first time she heard of what happened. Okay. It's the week of the parsha. I think it happened this week, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody have any questions or comments? I know people have to leave. While I'm waiting, you can unmute yourselves if you want and speak. Hannah, you have a comment? I see you.
Well, actually, believe it or not, in Tampa, Florida, it's a hotbed of sinkholes. There was a few, a little.
I can't hear you. Say again.
Sorry. Can you hear it? I'm getting.
Say again.
There was literally Tampa, Florida is a hotbed of sinkholes.
Oh.
There was a man a few years ago. His whole house was out. He and the house went down. And immediately we all started talking about Torah.
Did any happen this week?
Not this week that I know of.
Okay.
But it was a problem in Florida because people stopped offering sinkhole insurance. And they have to say that you have to have sinkhole insurance. Florida.
All right. What can you do? So anyway, none of us wants to be at the edge of a sinkhole, but I thank you for that. And so, yeah, so it's just, we have this, we have these messages that come to us, and sometimes they're really, really obvious if we're lucky. Bye, Chanala. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. I see there's no more comments and everybody's beginning to leave. And I want to wish you all, I wanted to I really, when I said it was my birthday parsha, and at the beginning I spoke about why this is so meaningful to me, I really want to tell you that Wednesday night's actually my birthday, but I want to give you all blessing for a year of continued Torah growth and personal growth and happiness and good health, and all the best to everyone. And thank you, Chana, so much. And thank you, Eleonora, Dr. Eleanor Gaudas, for sponsoring the shir. And I wish you all the best. Everyone, have a great, great week.
Thank you for the class.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for the class. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.